Lastly, I'm looking at the midpoint of a segment. So the point of a segment that is halfway between the two endpoints. So if I were to draw a segment, and I'm going to use the letters that are on here. Oh, I'm going to change this out before I begin. And I'm going to use A with AC with B in the middle, okay? If two segments are the same length, we say they're congruent. That just means that they have the same distance, the same value, all of that. So if I had segment uh, AB, and that was 8, and if segment CD was 8, these two segments would be congruent. And so the way we do this is we're talking about segments, so we need that line that's on top of them, and the symbol in between them, it's an equal sign with a little curly line over it, is what we call the congruent symbol. So this is our symbol for congruent symbol. So the midpoint is the point that is exactly halfway between the two. So if B were the midpoint of this image up here, that would mean that AB is congruent to BC. So if I were to assign these numbers, if BC were 6, that would mean that AB would also have to be 6. We can also mark this diagram as well. We can use these little lines. Those lines on these segments show me that AB is the same length as BC. We can also use the midpoint formula to find the midpoint if we're using the coordinate plane. Essentially, we find the average of the two numbers. So let's take a look at what this would look like on the coordinate plane. Again, I need to assign values x1 and y1 the same way I did with distance formula, x2, y2. And then I plug them in. So the midpoint, and typically m is the midpoint, it gives me that in the problem. So then I'm going to do x1 comes first, so it's going to be 3 plus 7 all divided by 2, comma, and then I do have my second coordinate, -6 plus 2 all over 2. If I'm doing this, I get 10 divided by 2, -4 divided by 2, which gives me 5, and -2. That would be the midpoint of the segment. All right. Then with this, if we're finding the coordinates of D, so this is giving us the segment for a visual here. F should be capitalized. Find the coordinates of D if E is the midpoint, so E is in between the other two, and DF is our segment. So it's giving me the coordinates here, and it's giving me the coordinate of F, which is -5, comma, -3. So it's asking me to go back and find this other value if E is given to me. So with that, I can go ahead and I can do -6, -4. So now there's a couple of ways I can do this. If I'm traveling from -5 to -6, I would just have to travel the same distance to point D. So if I were doing that, -5 to -6, I'm subtracting 1. I would subtract 1 again. That brings me to -7. Same thing if I were finding the coordinates of the y value to go from -3 to +4. Excuse me, that was an error on my part writing it in. That would be adding 7. So to continue in that way again, I would end at +11. So you're looking at the two distances. The answer to that would be -7, comma, 11. Finally, this is another application of the segment addition postulate. So it's telling me that I'm looking for the measure of PR. That's this whole length here. Okay. And in order to be able to do that, I'm looking for PR. And Q is the midpoint. So that means that Q is dividing this into two congruent pieces. So QR, so PQ is congruent to QR in this scenario, okay? So that means that they have the exact same measure. So this would be 6 minus 3x. And I know in this case that since I have a segment, I know that PQ plus QR has to equal PR. So I'm going to write that out. PQ plus QR equals PR. And I can use my expressions to create an equation for this. Now it just comes down to solving this equation. So I combine my like terms on the sides. So it's 6, not 16. 12 minus 6x equals 14x plus 2. I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides. Yes, I did write both of my 2's in different ways. So that gives me 10 minus 6x equals 14x. It's going to add 6x on both sides. 10 equals, those cancel, 20x. Then here I have to divide by 20, which gives me x equals 0.5. Again, important that I'm reading the question. I'm looking for the measure of PR. And I know that PR is 14x. So PR is 14x plus 2. So I'm going to need to go ahead and I'm going to have to substitute in this value. So PR is 14 times 0.5 plus 2, which is 7 plus 2, which is 9.